Alright guys, my name is Metagoblin and today I'm bringing you a Fury Warrior PvE DPS guide for Classic WoW. It's important to note that this guide will be relevant for every single phase of the game. In this video we will cover a number of topics: stat priority, pre-raid best in slot gear, enchants, consumables, talents, and lastly we'll finish off with the optimal DPS rotation demonstration. Just before we jump in guys, I'd just like to quickly thank Moosebeard for becoming my new Patreon. If you're interested in my Patreon and getting a personal thank you message at the beginning of my videos, then you can check that out in the description. And please do give me a quick follow on Twitch, as I'm trying to stream over there pretty much every single night. So let's jump in. First of all, we need to talk about stat priority. So a stat priority is as stands: 9% hit chance, then weapon skill, then strength / attack power, then agility / crit chance. So let's talk about each of these individual steps. First of all, let's talk about the hit chance. 9% is essential for your abilities to never miss the boss. We're talking yellow damage here, not white damage. For white damage to never miss the boss, you need something ridiculous like 27% hit chance, which is just not even obtainable with gear. If you need help learning, well, just finding out what your hit chance is, what your crit chance is and everything like that, I recommend the add-on Character Stat Classic, because it's important to know what your precise hit chance is, so then you can calculate how much hit pieces you need. And the reason why I say this is because weapon skill can affect your hit rating, so that is another thing to bear in mind. Now let's start talking about weapon skill. What we're going to be talking about here is glancing blows, which is a mechanic in the game, an unavoidable mechanic. You may notice as you level up you have a defense stat, and a maximum defense stat obtainable by your character increases by 5 per level, which means at level 60 everyone's going to have 300 defense, okay? Apart from if you're a tank and you're going to stack it higher. Theoretically, if you went to level 63, your defense stat would become 315. It so happens that bosses in the game are considered to be a level 63 enemy, which means they have a 315 defense skill. And this means they have 15 more points more than your weapon skill, which is probably going to be 300. This means when hitting the boss, you have a 40% chance for your attacks to be glancing blows, okay? A glancing blow has its damage reduced by 30% and will never crit. However, increasing your weapon skill over 300 reduces this damage debuff by 3% per point of weapon skill achieved over 300. So for instance, a human with sword specialization or mace specialization will have a 15% damage debuff rather than the big 30% damage debuff, and at 310 weapon skill you will have no damage debuff. And this is the cap that you are trying to aim for, so be mindful of weapon skill increasing items because they are quite rare. In fact, the only pieces you're probably going to go for are the Edge Master's handguards, which are extremely expensive and hard to obtain. And then you also have Maladath, the Rune Blade of the Black Flight, which is probably going to get you to 309 weapon skill. And then later on in Naxxramas you can have Hunger and Cold, which will get you to that cap. The next part of the stat priority, I would just recommend to stack strength and agility as high as you can. Remember that 20 points of agility will actually give you 1% crit, and this is why agility is so worthwhile and so valuable to a warrior, and it also means you have the right to need on some very good leather pieces with high agility stats. So as always with my PvE guides, I have a big warrior nuts and bolts list. As you can see on this page, I've decided to use Google Sheets this time because I think it's a little bit easier to navigate through the menu. But as you can see, this has your pre-raid best in slot gear, and be mindful of these little pieces here because these are going to become available when Diamol actually is released. And be mindful of a Lionheart's helmet. This is something you want to prioritize going for. It's quite difficult to obtain. It drops from raid bosses, but it's actually a blacksmithing recipe. It will cost you a bit of gold, but it will literally be best in slot until basically the entirety of Classic WoW. So being best in slot until the Burning Crusade. Anyway, the next page we have all the enchants, and as you can see, we have different phases for the enchants. So be mindful of when, what phase you're actually in, because there may be like better enchants available to you because of Zul'Gurub or things like that. Then the last page we have all the consumables and all the different consumable types, including class specific rage potions and these really cool sharpening stones that you can get. The elemental one drops from Molten Core. It might take a while for it to appear on your server, but it's really good because it increases your crit chance by 2%. So when it comes to talents for the warrior, you have 3 main options. Your first option is a standard dual wielding build, then you have a two-hander build, and then you have a hamstring kiting build, which is only viable for the Horde because it is complemented with the Wind Fury totem. So this is the dual wielding build. What it primarily focuses on is obviously dual wield spec to reduce the damage debuff of your offhand, and then all the standard DPS increasing abilities in Fury. And you're also going to be speccing 1 point into Overpower. We'll talk about Overpower a little bit more in depth in the rotation section, but that is an important talent to go for. Next we have the standard two-hander build. The differences here, obviously we don't want dual wield spec, we're going to spec into improved slam and two-handed weapon specialization. So you may have come across the kind of fact that dual wielding is actually better for single target DPS than two-hander, and that is technically correct. However, two-hander will actually come out on top slightly when it comes to AoE damage. But the reason why I'm giving you a two-hander build is because, you know, when you're raiding and you're clearing bosses, a lot of gear is going to drop. Sometimes one-hander weapons are going to drop. Sometimes two-hander weapons are going to drop. And you know, what are you going to do with the two-handers that drop? Are you just going to disenchant them or vendor them? Of course you're not. So it's important as a raid group to it's important to share out the gear, okay? Because it's a team effort, and you don't want to be sacrificing the entire raid's DPS just because some guy in your raid group is a warrior and he absolutely wants to try hard dual wielding spec. You're going to have to like basically man up, and you know, if a two-hander is dropped, you know, go ahead and roll on it, because you're going to increase your raid DPS, even if you're not going to be, even if like technically dual wielding is slightly better, but if you're gaining a weapon upgrade, a serious weapon upgrade, and it's a two-hander weapon, then your two-hander build is going to provide more DPS to you, just simply by the fact that you having a really good weapon. What really dictates the build that you're going to go for when it comes to raiding is what weapon you have, and what weapon you have basically dictated to be given on loot council, or you know, however you're doing your loot. Then the last build here is the hamstring kiting build. It's basically best complemented also with a two-hander. The only thing you really change here is getting improved cleave, because you can just have that slight bonus to your AoE damage. Before we start talking about rotation, obviously always have Battle Shout buffed. Remember, it is only a 2-minute duration, so remember to refresh it. And then use Blood Rage kind of pretty much whenever it's on cooldown, just to generate a little bit of extra cheeky rage. But obviously don't use it if you're about to die, and don't use it during a phase in a raid fight where you know you're going to take loads of damage. So basically just be smart and intelligent about how you use Blood Rage. So now we're going to give you a demonstration of the Fury Warrior rotation. First of all, we'll begin with the standard dual wield rotation. The priority is pretty straightforward. Bloodthirst has a priority over Whirlwind, and then at about 50 to 60 rage, that's when you can kind of fill in with Heroic Strike, but never spam Heroic Strike, because once the Heroic Strike has occurred, you want to have enough rage banked in order to use a Bloodthirst for when it comes back on cooldown. And another issue with Heroic Strike is if you spam it too much, you will really gimp your rage, and the reason for that is because Heroic Strike basically is a buff that you put onto your next melee swing, and when you put that buff on, it causes the next melee swing to not actually generate rage, because each melee swing generates rage, but when you use Heroic Strike, the next melee hit doesn't generate any rage, so your rage goes down, it basically sinks down very quickly when you use a Heroic Strike, so be mindful never to spam it. And another thing you need to bear in mind is Overpower. So basically, when you're hitting a boss, the boss has a chance to dodge your attacks. And when this happens, your DPS, your overall DPS is basically gimped. That's what the boss is doing, he's gimping your DPS by dodging you. And you can counteract this gimping effect by using Overpower. And to do that, you swap into Battle Stance, and then you use Overpower. And then you kind of negate this damage debuff that the boss has occurred. However, do not obviously swap over to Battle Stance if you have loads of rage banked up, because then you're gonna basically gimp your rage again, and you're basically wasting rage. You're wasting an entire Bloodthirst if you basically go over to Battle Stance over 30 rage. So you want to only use Overpower if the proc occurs and you're under 30 rage, then yeah, go ahead, Bob's your uncle, get on with it. Swap into Battle Stance, use a macro like this that I have right now, you know, /cast Battle Stance, /cast Overpower, pop into Overpower, Battle Stance, use Overpower, and then use a macro like this to basically just return into Berserker Stance and carry on. You can use an add-on called Classic Spell Activations, which will basically light up the Overpower spell on your bars. I'd recommend, even though I have it here on Shift F for some reason, I'm not actually using it as that keybind, because I want to be in Berserker stance, but I want to be able to see when Overpower becomes available, so I'm just going to have it in a default location on my bar. I'm not going to actually use that spell, you know, that keybind that it's currently on. It's just so that I can see it, because obviously I have it keybind to 9 instead. So let me do a little bit of rotation just to sort of show you what it actually looks like. You know, once you've banked up enough rage, you are prioritizing using Blood first. And then you can also use Blood Rage to like kind of get your rage going and get it high. And I'm not using Heroic Strike now because I'm not banking enough rage here. And then I'm just like banking my rage and using it sparsely on Blood first and Whirlwind. When you're in like a raiding environment, you have way more rage actually banked up because you actually will be taking damage as well as dealing damage. So for instance, now I've got to about 50 rage. This is when I can start using Heroic Strike just to kind of fill in the rotation. Apart from this, obviously, you know, when Overpower becomes available and you are below 30 rage, then I'd recommend, you know, swapping over to Battle Stance, pressing a macro like I just showed you, pop your Overpower, and then bosh, back into Berserker stance and carry on. So let's talk about the two-handed rotations, very similar to the dual wielding rotation. You know, Blood first will come before Whirlwind, and then after Whirlwind, instead of using Heroic Strike, you're going to prioritize using Slam instead. But the way you use Slam is actually quite important. You don't want to be using Slam just randomly. You want to use Slam straight after an auto attack, because it's basically a similar mechanic to how aim shot works for the hunter. You do not want to be gimping your melee, you know, your melee swings, your white damage, by resetting it with a Slam. Because if I, you know, I've just done a melee hit, but if I use Slam, the auto hit is like entirely reset. Basically how aim shot works. So when it comes to using Slam, you want to use Slam precisely after a melee hit. So I do a melee hit there, and then I use Slam straight after, so I do not gimp my white hits. I'm going to do it again. Straight after the melee hit, straight in with the Slam. And you know, it's the usual rotation: Blood first, Whirlwind, and then Slam straight after a melee hit, rather than using Heroic Strike. It is also important to note that you may want to spam a little bit of Hamstring in between your abilities, because you do want Flurry to basically have the maximum uptime available to you. But when you've got Flurry stacks, you don't need to spam Hamstring. But like, if you do not have Flurry, then I would recommend spamming a little bit of Hamstring in between, like this, hoping to get a crit. I don't have the best gear in the world on this character, but what you're trying to do. There you go. I can get a Flurry hit now, and then I can go into my normal rotation. It is important to keep Flurry up on your character as often as humanly possible. So let me talk you quickly through the Horde rotation, as it is slightly different to the Alliance rotation when it comes to two-hander. Basically, the same thing, you know, Blood first and Whirlwind are your priority over everything else, but as your filler ability, you want to actually use Hamstring. The reason why we use Hamstring is because every time you basically use a melee hit or a yellow special hit, you have a chance to proc Flurry, and Flurry increases your attack speed. And the reason why we like the increased attack speed is because the increased attack speed will increase the chance of Wind Fury procking. So if you have a Shaman in your group and he's giving you Wind Fury totem, then it becomes even more valuable to basically have your Flurry proc on the target. Sorry, to have your Flurry proc active on your character. So it's the same rotation, Blood first, then Whirlwind. You can use Overpower as well, but your main filler is just to spam the crap out of Hamstring. But obviously, as a filler, as a rage dumper, Hamstring, sometimes just doesn't dump rage fast enough. So, if you're getting over 80 rage, then fair enough, filling with a Heroic Strike. When it comes to the execute phase, the rotation changes slightly. It's very straightforward. You're just going to spam execute, pretty straightforward. And a lot of people like to save their cooldowns for the execute phase, because during the execute phase you're going to do more damage than a normal phase. So if it's a short fight, then pop Death Wish in the opener. But if it's a longer fight, then you probably want to pop it in the opener, because you want to count on the fact that you'll be able to use Death Wish twice in the entire fight. And then any other cooldowns like, Berserking, or any other racials like Blood Fury and stuff like that for the Orc, and all that jazz. But anyway guys, that's pretty much all there is to say about the DPS rotation and everything else in the video. So my name is Untitled Goblin, until my next video, ciao.